Heart Midwives is all about why midwifery matters. So if you're pregnant, looking to become pregnant, postpartum, someone with a uterus, or even care about someone with a uterus, these conversations are going to be relevant to your life. Hi, I'm Cheryl Furer. I'm a practicing midwife, certified homeopath, educator, and health coach. I believe deeply in the midwifery model of care, where pregnant women and people are fully listened to. Their provider gets to know them as a person, beyond numbers on a chart. A place where continuity of care is a normal part of pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Join us for stories of the history of midwifery, modern midwifery, pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and midwife life hacks. Subscribe for new episodes and share why you love midwifery in the comments. Let's dive in. Today we have Jacqueline Lynch with us. Jacqueline, will you please share a few words about yourself?
Hi. What can I share? My name is Jacqueline. I am a certified professional midwife. I have a degree in midwifery from Birthing Way College of Midwifery in Portland, Oregon, and I have been practicing since 2013 as a home birth midwife.
So I'd love to start with the question about the theme of this series. Why do you love midwifery?
That's probably the easiest one to answer. I love women. That's the biggest and strongest influence for me. That's my muse. That's the reason I do this work. I think that in modern conventional medical obstetrics, we put so much influence and importance on the baby. And yeah, of course, babies are important. They're the reason for pregnancy and birth, but we tend to forget that the baby is being carried by a whole human being. And we think of women in our modern culture as just incubators, vessels to hold these babies, when they really are beautiful human beings that are subjects of their own life, with their own beliefs and their own feelings and their own autonomy over their body. And when a woman goes into labor, she's not just birthing a baby, she's birthing a mom. She's becoming a mother, and that transition is where it's all at.
I love that.
Yeah.
What's your story of how you were inspired to become a midwife?
I started out with a degree in English and education, about as far away from anything medical or midwifery related as you could get. But I joined the Peace Corps as an English teacher and lived in West Africa for 5 years. And while I was there, I got to know the midwife in the village where I was living. And she became a good friend of mine. And when I was on break from school or had time to myself, I just gravitated to being with her and staying at her place where the women would come to birth their babies. And it was magic. And so then when I got back here to the US and started understanding and learning that actually people did midwifery and home birth here, it just, it became such a strong calling that I couldn't say no. And so here I am.
Do you have any stories of when you saw like the philosophy of midwifery or like that passion of midwifery, like actually in action? Can you share a story from your experience in that?
Oh, from the beginning, from Africa?
Either then or school or after school.
Gosh,
Yeah, I know so many.
I think the biggest takeaway from my years in West Africa was that I think a couple of things. One, just that the midwife was so much more than just a provider for birthing women. She was the wise woman. She was the center of our community. Everybody knew her. Everybody took care of her, bringing her food and animals and clothes and whatever she could possibly need. And she was the herbalist. She was the healer. She was the one that people came to when their kiddos, got hurt or got sick. She was the one that couples would go to when they needed help with marital issues. She was the one that the village chief would go to when they had arguments about property or what crops to plant or anything like that. and just that traditional way of having that central focus on the person who's the glue that holds the whole community together.
I often think about midwives from our history who, or for present in spaces where there are still strong communities, that we were also the genealogist of the community. So we know whose parents were whose parents, the grandparents, maybe even the great grandparents. And then as we trained new midwives, or as we were trained, the one who was training us would tell us the stories of the history of our people and the history of, where we came from, of whose relationships have been with whom, and, how we've grown as a community and as a people. And that's definitely something that, as a, person living in the United States who is, living in the suburbs, very modern lifestyle in those ways, are common for the US. I'm like, I don't know, because there's lots of ways to have a modern lifestyle. But I think about that and maybe even romanticize it a little bit. But just to even hear, this midwife in West Africa where you were in the Peace Corps, and how she is living that life where the community took care of her and she takes care of the community, and they're all in relationship to each other. And that's something that I just value a lot and, kind of yearn for a bit as a midwife.
So much so, and then again, when I was apprenticing back here in the States in Oregon, one of my most beloved teachers, Anita, is a midwife who, she's Mexican and Chicana. She grew up in the hills of Mexico, going to births on horseback with her great-grandmother. And so she holds that lineage that was passed down grandmother to granddaughter over the centuries, generation after generation after generation. And, I had been at a MEAC accredited school, done a 4-year degree, apprenticed with 5 other different midwives in a high volume birth center, all of that for years and years and years. And I can tell you that I learned more in the 6 months I spent with her than who had never been educated, never graduated high school, never had any of that. I learned more about how to be with women from those 6 months than I did in any of the rest of my training. And it's that piece of the education and the training that I hold most dear. Yeah.
I love the way that this conversation is taking us because, when we're talking about modern midwifery, there can be lots of different ways of remembering how midwifery has been since the beginning of humanity. I like to say that it really is the oldest profession.
Midwifery and prostitution, right? The 2 oldest professions.
I would just say midwifery is, honestly. Because, midwives have been supporting, birthing women and people giving birth since the beginning of people giving birth. And even in other mammals, we see, what we would call midwifery happening in other animals, the way that they protect each other or even help each other out. There was a story of a whale who, it seemed as there were 2 female whales and one of them gave birth, and there were some marks on the newborn calf whale. And the scientists had thought, the ones who were studying this pod had thought that maybe the one whale had like midwifed the other one and kind of helped that birth. Maybe there was a difficulty in that birth process. And so the midwife whale had kind of held on to that calf and helped that calf be born. Or like the story of elephants, how they will circle the birthing elephant in order to protect that elephant, but also just to provide that safety and security and the celebration that elephants will do after one of them give birth. Like just that way that the community comes together around that. And so when we're talking about, modern midwifery and, how we've kind of lost some of that opportunity, I mean, it almost seems like midwives attract community anyway. I mean, I definitely, recognize that there are people in my life that would not be in my life if I wasn't a midwife. And I'm so grateful for all of my past clients um and yet we've kind of lost that piece around the, interdependence of each other, the interconnectedness of each other. And
like community focused,
yeah,
community-centric birth, family birth are just so important.
yeah. So I'd love to, talk a little bit more about that, about how we create community as midwives, or, your experience of being in community with midwives, with families, with birthing parents, things like that. I'd love to hear more about what you've done to create that experience.
Oh, goodness. What's interesting is that whole movement away from community supported birth, to me, it is indicative, an example of just how so much in our society is moving away from community-centered life in general, right? And it's something that I saw while I was in West Africa, and also when I went to Haiti to practice there for a little while too, of moving birth, even in those rural areas, out from the home, from the local midwives, and trying to move it into larger urban centers and big hospitals. And what we've seen here in our country is starting to get mimicked in places like Brazil, in places like West Africa, where all of a sudden there is a higher number of surgical births and interventions, and pulling families apart and pulling mamas away from their other kiddos and their support teams. And then we see maternal and infant morbidity and mortality rates going up, just like they are here in the US, right? And so I think it's all interconnected when we're living in closer knit communities where we're growing food together, where we are sitting at the table together, where we're birthing our babies with our sisters and our aunties and our grandmothers. That's where we're safest. That's where we have the fewest interventions. That's where we're allowed to just drop down into our real animal mammal selves, right? I think that we start forgetting that we actually are animals, and that we need to foster our connection with our animal instincts in order to birth our baby.
Well, and it's so interesting too, because even for the birthing process, pregnancy, depending on how the pregnancy goes, but the birthing process and postpartum, with my families, I'm always talking to them about like, who's your support team, who, is going to be there to feed you and to bring you, to take away your dishes and to clean up around the house and to support you so that you can support your baby in the postpartum period. And again, when we are in a tighter knit community, that is a little bit more of a given. I know I saw a little bit more of that when I was in Utah doing a lot of my training, where, it was, if you were part of the Latter-day Saints community in that region, they kind of had that built in a way. But yeah, so it's definitely something that is, it's almost impossible to move away from birthing without community, or being postpartum without community. I mean, it's just such a shame that many of our parents or grandparents had to, experience this kind of nuclear family fantasy that was spouted to, the American culture as like, this is the way that we have to do it, is or this is the way that we want to do it. I guess they weren't saying you have to do it like this, but they were making it seem like
modern and new and the best. And yeah,
this is the way that is the best way to do it. And, it's just not, it's not how we have evolved as a species. We've evolved to be in community. We've evolved to be supportive of each other and, come sit by the bed of a newly birthed person and, supporting them and just having conversations, feeding them, like just the whole thing, taking the kiddos and playing with the kids for a little while, just all the different ways that we support each other in community. It's just,
and like to that end, one of the things that's so important to me when I work with clients is really, as much as possible in the short span of, a year that I get to work with most of my clients, which in our modern day, we think a year is a long time, but in the grand scheme of things, it's the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
And so, in a modern obstetrical practice, a prenatal appointment is 15 minutes long and, take measurements, measure your blood pressure and kick you right back out again, put some notes down on a computer. Whereas one of the things that's so, so important to me is developing that relationship, developing that trust and that sisterhood. Most of my clients, my past clients to this day, are my closest sisters and friends. I see them, on the weekly or monthly basis, even if their kiddos are 3, 4, 6 years old, prenatal appointments, they're not 20 minutes. They're 2, 3, 4 hours, right? I can never do more than 2 prenatal appointments in a day. I'm just not capable of it because where's the time to sit and drink tea together, to share a meal, to cook food for the kiddos, to play with the dog on the floor, to go for a hike together, right? Like, those are so much more important than measuring what your fundal height is or, what blood test you've had this week. Yeah, it's way, way, way more important. And that's what shows me how to show up for them in their moment of birth, right? When I can see, what art do you have hanging on your walls? Do you have an altar to a particular deity or a spiritual tradition, right? Do you like cozy, warm blankets, or do you like a more simplified, modern look to your home? How do you interact with the kiddos that you do have or with your partner? All of those things teach me how to show up for you at your birth, right? And I can't do that if I'm meeting you in an office space that's not yours, or I'm not meeting your extended family. I want to get to know your grandma and learn about how your mom birthed her babies. All of that. And that tells me much more than a complete blood count that I draw and send to the lab. It tells me so much more.
Mildly useful information, but yes, you're right. It tells you so much more when you can
ask so much more than that.
And share stories. And I think that what you're really describing here is something very fundamental to midwifery, and it's this piece around building relationships. And in those relationships, we build community, and in community, we build interconnectedness. We build, we just build care and love. And
Yeah, that reminds me of another story from Anita, the Indigenous midwife that I apprenticed with in Oregon. And so we were out in, the rural outskirts outside of Eugene, Oregon, and we were attending a birth. And Anita had birthed all of the grandmas, had attended the birth of all the grandmas' babies. And now the granddaughter was having her first baby. And so Anita had been there through 3 generations of that family. The entire extended family, all the cousins and aunts and sisters, all knew her. The grandma was like her best friend. And so here we are, all gathered together for the granddaughter's first child. And there are candles lit, and it's quiet, and we're singing. And one of the sisters was quietly drumming in the corner. And it was just the most sacred, beautiful experience. And when the baby was getting ready to come, the dad was perched on the back of the tub in back of the mom, holding her and supporting her. And Anita and I were on either side of her. And the grandma looked up at Anita, the midwife, and Anita nodded to her. And she stripped off her sweater and her pants and jumped into the water of the birthing pool and caught her granddaughter. No, and like, that's what it's about. That's what midwifery is about knowing 3 generations of a family so well that with just the tiniest little look and nod, you just automatically know and you're on the same page. And that grandma just feels completely comfortable to just jump right into the pool and receive her granddaughter. You know, that's what midwifery is right there.
Oh, that's so special. It's like, mic drop, we're done.
Yeah, and that was 10 years ago, and I still get goosebumps thinking about how beautiful it was.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I love that story. Mm.
Mm-hmm. You know, or another one, this family that I worked with up in northern Colorado, who I just love dearly. And I caught their 2 youngest kiddos, their 2 youngest kids, and their 2 oldest girls, they have 5 children. Their 2 oldest daughters are 16 and 14 now. And so now I'm working with the mom to create ritual space for the 2 oldest daughters as they come into menarche and learning about their bodies and about how to direct their own fertility and learn about their cycles and how to plan their own pregnancies when they're ready, and just supporting the whole cycle of that family from birth through rites of passage and coming of age and menarche through to having their babies and then into menopause and the crone and senior years. You know, it's just, yeah, it's magic.
Oh, I just got goosebumps. That's so special. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have any, I mean, we've talked about lots of life lessons, but do you have any like life lessons or kind of like life hacks that you sort of like gained through the perspective of midwifery?
Probably a lot that I don't listen to as much as I should. I think patience is a big one. I think the biggest one probably that I do listen to and that I hold very dear and that really directs how I live my life is the sense that so much of pregnancy and the birth process is a mystery. And so much of life is a mystery, and we can't predict it, and we have no idea where it's going to go or what's going to happen, you know. And our modern medicine, like conventional medicine, can do a lot of tests and a lot of ultrasounds and a lot of this, that, and the other and procedures to try to take the mystery out of it because we want to know everything about it and predict everything about it. But when it really comes down to it, we can't see inside. And the only real way to know what's happening with that baby on the inside is Miss Bodie Cat is a shoulder sitter for sure. Her favorite thing.
Just for our viewers for 1 second, this is actually Jacqueline's cat, who is I'm sitting for. I'm watching her cat, and she definitely knows that I am hanging out with Jacqueline right now because she's wanting to, yeah. And she's like rubbing against the headset. She's like, my mom is on the other side of this headset. I know it. I know that she is there. I love her.
Such a sweet girl. Oh,
here's your Bodie cat.
Anyway,
yeah, we were talking about like learning patience and just being able to,
and that mystery and
the mystery.
That, no, like I have found that that sometimes even all the tests and the numbers and the figures and the things that we can measure look beautiful and perfect and right. But if the mama has an intuition that something's not quite right, you listen to that intuition. Even if you can't see anything, even if there's nothing that science or your medical brain can tell you, trust that mystery, you know. Trust that you don't know everything, that there's no way that you could ever know everything, no matter how much technology we have, right? And that we just don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much that we not only don't know, can't know. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I have a story of a missed test, and we had the mom wanted, all the tests, and so as a midwife we support that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until after her baby was born that we found that this little person had a mosaic of trisomy 18.
Mm-hmm.
So that means is some of the cells had trisomy 18 and some of the cells didn't. And unlike trisomy 21, trisomy 18 usually isn't compatible with life or with living very long. And she had the genetic screening, and it was one of those super rare situations that it was missed, but the mom knew intuitively. A lot of our prenatal appointments were her just crying and not understanding, and I didn't understand either, but I just held space for her and just said, all we can do is keep moving forward until we have more information, and honoring her knowing, her inner knowing of,
she knew something was going on, even
yeah,
though all the tests said everything's fine.
exactly. And there's a little bit of a balance that I found with my clients, that we have so much fear built into our society in all different kinds of ways. I mean, if nothing else, the last couple of years have shown how prevalent fear and how it can be spread so intensely through our society, and which means it's being spread through us and our nervous systems. And whatever that fear is based on, I get it. There are scary things in the world, and recognizing that we're kind of bathed, the media bathes us in fear, the stories that are told in the world are bathed us in fear. And I love this point that you bring up around, like, remembering that every moment is actually a mystery. We don't know what the next moment holds for us, and kind of holding a curiosity is a lot better for our nervous systems than the fear and the intensity around fear, and particularly fear, and since we're talking about midwifery, particularly fear around pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And when you're choosing your care providers, a lot of care providers are living in that fear as well. I mean, I can't wait till I get to interview some people who work in hospital settings and in labor delivery units, and just having the opportunity to explore, like, their experience around, how these fears just, they go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, and they don't really process when they have fearful events. And so they don't integrate it, and they're just living in it and swimming in it and bringing it to the next experience, even though that's a totally different experience. So
and it's really interesting how we almost get this belief that if we do all the tests and all the ultrasounds, and we have all the technology, and we have all the monitoring, and we have all the surgery and the medications, that we are going to insulate ourselves from that mystery. We're going to take all the mystery out of it. Everything's going to be planned, and everything's going to be perfect, and it's always going to go right. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
No matter how much that we throw at it, that mystery is still there, and there's still a whole lot that we don't know and that we can't know. Like,
Yeah.
it's really important that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Gosh, I feel like we could have a whole nother episode on this, but then there's this piece around resilience and being able to face the uncertainty and face the mysteries, and how midwifery actually helps build resilience in pregnancy and birth and postpartum. And we really
and life
exactly.
right?
You know, like, wow, gosh. Okay, so we could have a whole nother episode on this. But just to wrap up today, because I'd love to share with people how they can find you if they want to connect with you more. Would you like to share your social media, website? We'll also post it in the notes below.
Right on. Yeah, so my website is just moonsong.org. And so for right now, it's a really bare bones, simple little website. I do a lot of other work outside of midwifery work. So I also do plant medicine journey work and herbal healing, and help people step through other big transitions in life. So for me, midwifery and childbirth and pregnancy are a massive transition into motherhood, into womanhood, or into just another phase of being in this world. And so I like to extend that out to other transitions as well. Death and dying. I work as a death midwife as well. And plant medicine journeys, helping with other transitions in life. Right. And then in terms of social media, I am on Facebook. I think it's just my name, Jacqueline Lynch. I don't have a professional page up at the moment. And then on Instagram, Cheryl, you would know this better than I am. I do. I think it's Moonsong22 is my Instagram. I should know these things, but I'm such a horrible person when it comes to technology and socials and all the things.
Well, and I will also put in a little way to connect too, is that you work with Your Thriving Pregnancy as well. And as we are growing this way of serving people in the world, you are one of the midwives that are part of Your Thriving Pregnancy as well.
Right.
Yeah. So moonsong.org. And like I said, we will link all of the links in the comments. And I just want to share so much gratitude and appreciation for you, Jacqueline. Like I said, you're one of my dear friends. I am cat sitting your kitty cat right now, who made a guest appearance in this video.
Much for that, because it allows me to travel and support other sister midwives, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. So thank you so much for taking this time out today and for sharing why you love midwifery. I appreciate you.
Likewise, sister. Thank you.